Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Usagi Podjimbo podcast. I'm your host, Mike. Hope everybody's doing well out there. I took off last week. I was a little busy, but let's get back into recording some Usagi Yojimbo and talk about some comic books and stuff. We got a real interesting episode for you tonight, or issue for you tonight, or today, or tomorrow, whenever you're listening to this, in the present, in the past, who knows. If you're new to the podcast, go back and listen to all my other old episodes of the podcast. Uh, we just talk about Usagi Yojimbo and my thoughts about it and stuff like that, about the particular comics. We are on issue 20 of volume 1 of Usagi Yojimbo, and that is called A Kite's Tale, or A Kite's Story. I can't remember exactly what it's called because I'm not looking at the comic at this moment while I'm doing the intro. But let's get into this episode. Hope you guys have a fun time listening. If you would like to give me feedback, you can do so at my Instagram at Usagi Podjimbo, or my Facebook page or my Facebook group, Usagi Podjimbo and Usagi Yojimbo podcast. You can just look up Usagi Podjimbo. We're like 25 members strong at the moment. Just saying, it's always cool to talk to people about one of our favorite comics when we can. Yeah. But let's get into this. So our comic starts out with the narration 300 years ago, a celebration of completion for an irrigation canal of from a wise lord decreed that a festival would take place of flying kites, apparently. And they celebrated this service with a dual purpose. Not only did it give the people a well earned holiday, but the thousands of feet uh, th- through the grounds alongside the canal uh, tapped into the solid embankments, So I guess it worked out. But every June, they end up celebrating this, I guess, festival or thing. It's called the, hope I don't butcher this, the Taco Kichi Matsuri, which translates to Kite Crazy Festival. And that's what's being held today in this story. Our story starts out with the Kite Maker's Tale. Very interesting way to start out this part of the issue, I'd have to say. But his name is Tatsubaro. I believe that's how you say it, Tatsubaro, and he is a kite maker. And we go through the process of how he goes through and makes these kites. He is particularly going to be making a Odako, o, Odako, which is translates to giant kite. And he talks about how like he begins at the beginning of the year in autumn, and when the bamboo must be cut from the bone, he says. And he starts talking about what he actually does with the bamboo, how he cuts it, how he treats it, stuff like that. I'm not really going to go into too much detail about how exactly he cuts down the bamboo, but he does, and in his treating and whatnot. He talks about how he's going to go make paper and how he goes up this specific mountain each year. He has to travel up the mountain even farther each year because he's running out of trees to cut down. It seems like to get the best fibers for the paper that he is making. This really interesting scene of him actually going through the process of making or treating the bamboo and making the paper and stuff like that. Very much exposition heavy, I do have to say. It's very exposition heavy, and how he has to boil the paper, or the stuff he gets for the paper, and he has to wash it out and get all the fibers and stuff, and he has to dry it out, and he puts this paste on the paper and stuff like that, all for this kite festival. And you get this cool scene of all the people playing with their kites, and he just happens to say that another kite that he had which is a fighting kite, and the fighting kite like fights with all these other kites, and you're supposed to go and fight them and like cut the strings off the other kites. The best one wins, obviously, kind of like a duel almost. And we see all these fun little people are flying all their kites. And this year, like I said, he made this really big kite. And this kite is really big. It's like at least 2 stories tall, it seems like, as these people are climbing up, scaling up the bones of the kite or of the side of the kite. It's like up on like sort of like a scaffolding almost, and they're getting ready to launch the kite. And they need like 20 to 30 people, it seems like, to launch this kite, which is it seems very daunting of a task, I have to say. Then we transition from that, the kite maker tale, to the gambler's tale. This is where it gets kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting this, to be honest. But we meet Hatsu, and Hatsu is like this cat guy, and he likes the festival because the festival is always profitable for the gambler. There's many tourists in town, very much a tourist trap, you could say. And he and his gang set up at the inn, paying the owner to discreetly look the other way, because as they play the odds and evens game where they roll dice, or it's kind of like Yahtzee, but if Yahtzee was like gambling, I guess you could say, because they put 2 dice in a cup and like fling it around, and you get odds or evens, you guess, and if you guess right, you obviously win. But he is very good because he cheats at his game, and yeah, that doesn't work really out for him too well, I gotta say, in this particular story. But he ends up taking this one guy's everything, basically. He takes all his money, and he's like, "All right, I'm." The guy's like, "All right, I only have my shoes left, basically." He also has his clothes, but he did not bet his clothes. And they're like, "Oh, get lost again," Hatsu says. And he's like, "Oh, who are you, Ronin? You want to come in for a bet and test your luck in this game we got going on?" And Usagi says, "No, I'm good. I'm here for a bite to eat." And Hatsu is very much like, "Oh, really?" He happens to think that Usagi might have some money on him. And we see this bear guy in his loincloth rolling the dice, and the guy who bet his shoes ended up losing his shoes. And Hatsu is like, "Oh yeah, leave my shoes at the door so I can get them later." And this guy is very much discouraged. He's mad. It does not work out for him. But Usagi decides to actually jump in. He's like, "Excuse me, I would actually like to play around." And Hatsu is very uh, happy that this guy's Usagi is going to play around, because he thinks he's going to get one up on old Usagi. So they get ready to roll the dice, and the bear guy is like, "Okay, let's do this." And as he goes to drop the dice, Usagi whips out his sword. All the gang guys are cowering in a corner. They're like, "Oh my god!" And Hatsu's like, "What are you doing? What's the big idea? Are you insane?" And Usagi's like, "Look at the dice. They've been weighted, and a string is wired in the bucket, so it could flip the dice as he reveals them." So we find out that all the patrons who gambled at this particular establishment are all mad, and they end up chasing out the bad guys, the gang, and they're like, "Yeah, we showed you, we got you." And they're like, "Oh, thanks, samurai." So Usagi did a good deed for that day, and they're like, "Okay, we're gonna go get all the other gamblers out of town." And as the Hatsu and his gang are up on a hill, they see all the other gamblers getting ran out of town, and they're going to hoof it and run away, because they're going to probably blame Hatsu and his gang for all the mess that they caused, which I don't blame them. I think they should blame Hatsu and all the other guys that work for Hatsu. So all the other gamblers end up showing up to Hatsu and his gang, and we get this one big, beefy gorilla guy. I think he's a gorilla. He looks like a gorilla, or like more like an ape, probably a gorilla. I want to say I like the design of this particular um, character. He looks like he's wearing like a robe, like like a dad would wear in like the 40s or 50s, because it's like a a plaid pattern with squares all over it. It's a very funny look, and I like the touch of this because it just looks like he's wearing like a bathrobe, I would say. And he's like, "Hey, well, what's going on, Hatsu? Are you the one responsible for this?" And yeah, he's like, "Yeah, he's the gambler who scammed everybody. He wasn't honest." Hatsu ends up backpedaling and saying that it wasn't him. It was the long-eared Ronin. He accused us of cheating. Obviously, we didn't cheat because we're not cheaters. We're honest gamblers. Scout's honor. And he's kind of like has like sweat dripping from his face. And he's like, okay. This one particular gambler is like, okay, the monkey gambler, the gorilla, whatever he is. He's like, okay, show me where this long haired Ronin is. They're going to go after him. And, we get to the Ronin's tale as we see. And, it says, I am Yamato Usagi, master of this wanderer. I travel and I've come to this particular province to see the kite celebration. And Usagi's walking along. I love this scene. It's a very simple scene of like a silhouette of Usagi in the grass, and in the background, just a bunch of little kites up in the air. I love this one particular panel. It's very nice, and all the very simple art that is done in this one particular panel, but yet shows so much about the story. I would love to have this like printed out and like on an art piece. It very much looks like an art piece to me. But we see them, the bad guys are like, there he is. There's that Ronin, that scum. He's got all of our money. He turned us in for the reward type of thing. Like, we're going to get you, and you turned all the town folks on us. How could you? This big, like, group of gamblers or bad guys, whatever you want to call them. They go after them, and they're like, oh, get him. And Hatsu is there, too, with the big gorilla guy. And Usagi's like, wait, listen to me. And they're like, no, we're not going to listen to you. And he basically kicks them all in a row, and they all fall down. They start hucking rocks at him. And they're like, oh, stop him, stop him. And he's like, Usagi says, curse those gamblers, and runs off. He's like, I wish I could get my hands on them. They're still chasing Usagi through the kite festival. And we see the big kite is ready to be launched. The wind is perfect. Pull the cord, pull the rope. And they're like, oh, hey, what's going on here? What are these guys doing in the background? And there you see Usagi running towards the kite. And Usagi runs and jumps and gets on the kite. And we see all the guys who are working to launch the kite are all the people who got swindled by the gamblers. And a big like brawl ensues kind of between the gamblers and the people who lost all their money. And the kite maker Tatsubaro ends up losing grip of his kite, his big giant kite that he made. And he's like, oh no, come back. And he's very, very sad. Then we get the Kite Maker 2s, or my Kite Maker Tales 2. And we see it's autumn now. The kite maker Tatsubaro ends up in the forest cutting down more bamboo. He's like, I got to work at this again, and he happens to see something that catches his eye. He's like, oh my God, the kite paper has deteriorated, but the bones still remain. And we see his kite. It's in this like a lake. And we see the very top of the paper has not really deteriorated. It's just deteriorated some. And he's like, he sees the footprints, and he's obviously like, oh, obviously the Ronin lived because of my kite. How well it was made, I'm guessing. He looks at the kite for a while, looks at the bones of the kite, turns away, and he's like, I have work to do, he says. Tatsubaro says, I have work to do. Next year, I'm going to make a bigger, better kite. And that is where our issue ends. This issue, I have to say, is very different from all the other issues that I've covered recently on the podcast. I was I want to say hesitant to cover this issue because I didn't know how well it was going to come out on the podcast. I very much did gloss over a lot of the steps and processes of making the kite. There was a lot of exposition and like tutorials on how to make the kite and steps on how to make a proper kite, which was really interesting, I do have to say, in that aspect. Seeing and getting and learning about the kite's process of making like a kite in feudal Japan. It was very interesting. This isn't my particular favorite Usagi story, but from a historical standpoint, I like it enough. Like it's not a terrible story. I've read worse stories. I have to say, this one is okay. I feel like it's very much a teaching process or teaching story. I have to say, and that way I do find it interesting. And see how Usagi gets weaving into this story is really interesting because Usagi is not in it for like the first half of the story. You know, Usagi shows up at the towards the end of the story, and we get more about what kites are and stuff like that. I did not know how kites were made, but I know. It's interesting. Maybe well, I know we do get more of like historical things in Usagi Yojimbo, but it's cool to learn about other cultures' history. And I have to say, yeah, this story is not bad. Not a lot of action in this particular issue, which is okay. We don't always have to have action and fighting in Usagi Yojimbo. Sometimes we just need a little bit of like quiet issues, and that's not bad. Like after the last issue, which was a very very heavy, which was Frost and Fire, very heavy issue. This one is a little bit more lighthearted to say, and it's kind of interesting, you know. But yeah, um, don't really have much to say about this issue, I guess, unfortunately. But we're moving on. I hope you guys enjoyed this particular issue or episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace out. Give me some feedback if you want to give me some feedback. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in particular. Hit me up on my Facebook page at Usagi Podjimbo. I'll leave a link for this particular episode on there. Comment on there and let me know what you guys think of a kite story. So, yeah, we'll do that. Do that. Go do that. I love to hear your thoughts on this story. So, peace out. Stay safe. Read some Usagi.